help me welcome Moses Kemibaro on stage with a clap.
Okay, by now I'm sure all of you must have some idea of what is now popularly being called Web3. As mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege of working through all the different eras of the web. So Web 1 went to Web 2, Web 3. And I think for me, what I'm finding a lot of people are grappling with is, what is it? How does it work? Which is why I was saying, let's go beyond the hype. Let's go beyond all the stories. Let's go beyond overvalued crypto and things like this, and focus on what's important and why this is a great opportunity for all of us individually and as organizations to take full advantage of the potential. And more importantly, how is it the future of digital, and how is it therefore different from what we know today? So this is a great quote I came across recently by somebody called Alvin Toffler. He's a sort of a management leader in terms of thinking, and he says, the literate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn and unlearn and relearn. And I think what I've learned in sort of the successive stages from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 3 is that everything changes. When I set up my company back in 2002, which is actually 20 years ago, we were building websites. That was the Web 1 era. And I'll never forget when social media started to take off, what we discovered is that we're hopelessly equipped to deal with social media. And it probably took us somewhere in the region of 2 to 5 years to finally understand how to do it, how to make content, how to understand the new dynamics of social media. Because even by today's statistics, the average person spends about 70% of their time on their mobile device on social media, all right? So this is a big deal, right? People no longer go to websites per se, they go to social media, and that's where they discover content. And therefore, when you're jumping from something like Web 2 to Web 3, you have to acquire a whole new range of skills and understanding and perspectives so that you can make the best opportunities out of the new trend. And it requires effort, it requires learning, it requires you to sort of position yourself to get the best out of it. So these are some essential numbers for Kenya, giving you some indications of our internet sort of uptake in the country. And you can see our population is about 55 million. Cellular connections, of course, Kenyans, we always have our second phone, our second Mulika Mwizi, so 63.48. So this is again a reference to the fact that we have more than one device. And then internet users, almost 50% of our population, according to these statistics, is now connected. But also interesting, our active social media users, according to the research, is 11.75. My view is that that number is completely understated. I think that number is closer to about 30 million, right? Because everyone, including the askari and the maid, is also on social media. True or false? In fact, I'll give you a story. The first time a maid who currently works with us came to our house 3 years ago, what was the first thing she asked for when she came into the home? She didn't ask for water. She didn't ask for food. She asked for a password, your Wi-Fi. And then what happened 2 days later? The askari. The askari who had been working with us for over 2 years came to us and said, Mimi pia naomba Wi-Fi password. And I can tell you for free, that guy is a sport pesa guy. He's a guy of betting and stuff. So what you find is that the internet has become a basic human right in this country. Everyone at every class expects it in the same way they expect to have water or food and something essentially basic. Susan, thank you. In terms of our internet use, again, the numbers are interesting, but I think the one that is very interesting here is how much time we're spending on the mobile internet, 3 hours, 51 minutes, right? Remember Michael Joseph once said that Kenyans are peculiar? Yeah, so we're spending close to 4 hours a day on our devices consuming internet. These are Kenya numbers, huh? And then the percentage of internet users accessing via mobile phone, 95.9%. So whatever we can say in this country, and is essentially the case across Africa, the mobile and the internet go hand in hand, as do social media. The mobile, the internet, and social media. Those 3 things work together. That is how we consume, that is how we create, and that's how we do our stuff currently in Web 2.0. Next slide, please, Susan. So let's talk about the first stage, Web 1, the early web. This is the stage where I started, over 20 years ago. This is about web pages and websites, hosting pages on ISP servers, web hosting, and this is where all the interesting things happened. But if you go to the next slide, we had what we called the bubble, the dot-com bubble, and this is when a lot of people started speculating and investing money into startups that many of which did not have a solid business model or fundamental business principle. As a result, the Nasdaq rose by over 400%, which is the stock market in the US, and then went down by 78% by its peak in October 2002, so almost 20 years ago. And during this time, basically, there were companies that went out of business, including one called Webvan. Webvan is essentially what is today Jumia or Amazon. They were selling, groceries and products online. But the likes of Amazon and Google came out stronger. All right? The Amazon you see today is one of the survivors of that moment. And as we talk about Web3, I want you to look back at what's happening right now in the market with crypto. Everyone is saying crypto is dead, it's over. But what you need to understand is that Web 1.0 gave us the foundation to understand how this technology was going to affect the world as we know it. And the survivors and the companies that got it right were people like Amazon and Google. Let's go to Web 2. Next slide, please. So then we entered Web 2. This is about something like 10 to 15 years ago when it started to happen, the likes of Facebook and so forth coming along. And the big transition in Web 2 was that we moved from a scenario where we were essentially in a centralized environment where content is created for us and we consume it or use online services to what we'd call the user-generated content, where users now were not just consumers of content, but also creators of content, the interactive web. Yeah, so with social media, with Facebook, Twitters, and so forth, we started seeing the usability, the interoperability, the fact that we now use our devices to create content, to consume content. And this real interaction and collaboration has really transformed the internet into a landscape that is highly collaborative. However, if we move to the next slide, we see the big backlash, which is the rise of big tech. All right, so as this has happened, we see companies like Facebook, companies like Meta, Apple, and so forth, have become incredibly powerful in how they control the internet and how people engage with it. As a result, we've seen a transition or a moving transition towards a situation which is now Web3, which is more of a decentralized scenario where users now do not necessarily have to rely on the big tech platforms, but essentially can work in a decentralized internet where whatever they do and whatever they do online is fully controlled by them. Next slide, please. So Web3, or the metaverse, is essentially the future, and what we're here to discuss today. It's the idea that the World Wide Web is now essentially decentralized and based on token economics. Hence, a lot of the references to things like the blockchain, or what we like to call Bitcoins and Ethereum, the currencies that are used predominantly on these platforms. And the idea is that instead of it being centralized in several companies or what we call the big tech players, the idea is that we're going to be able to use blockchain technologies, cryptocurrencies, and things like non-fungible tokens to essentially put the power back in the hands of the people when it comes to how they interact and do things online. Next slide, please. So for me, the biggest statement of intent that tells us a huge story around the future of this Web 3.0 situation is when Facebook actually went and changed their name to Meta. And for me, this is an indication of the fact that Mark Zuckerberg and his organization have seen the potential of this space. Now, just because they've taken all the big steps does not necessarily mean they're going to be winners in this third phase of the internet, or the web, so to speak. But it does provide us with an idea of what the next step or the next potential is going to be. But the reality is that a lot of the things you're seeing will not happen immediately. These things are going to take something like 10 to 15 to 20 years to become important. What I want to do is focus on the things that really make sense at this point in time. So first of all, the blockchain. Do all of us know what the blockchain is? Or the concept of the blockchain? All right, so the blockchain is basically the underpinning technology behind things like cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and so forth. And this is really the foundation upon which Web 2.0 becomes, Web 3.0 becomes possible. So the idea is that we want to have a digital ledger of transactions or activities around digital assets. And that's really the big part around what Web 3.0 is about. That the blockchain basically provides a centralized, or rather decentralized way of understanding who owns what within a digital environment. And in this case, of course, we're talking about the metaverse or Web 3.0, and the information is immutable, meaning that you can't change it. So when you make a transaction with somebody on the blockchain using something, let's say Bitcoin or Ethereum, the systems that mine that chain are able to give an indication of who actually owns it is all decentralized through the blockchain. Next one. So behind this, again, we have what we call smart contracts. And a smart contract is basically what gives us a clear indication of what is happening within a blockchain. And again, this automates the execution of the agreement so the participants can be immediately informed of an outcome without any intermediaries' involvement or time loss. So you can see an indication there, for instance, Bob wants to sell a house. He connects with a potential seller or buyer. The smart contract receives the assets, it distributes the assets. You can see the digitization of currencies, things like Bitcoin in between. And then there's the undisputed ownership, and the land deed is digitized. So when you think about Web3 and that sort of thing, the idea is that things like smart contracts allow us to have sort of a a clear understanding of how the transaction is handled, and the fact that it's solid and no one can actually tamper with that. Next slide. And then, of course, crypto, which is the digital currencies that all of us have seen in the market. In fact, I think earlier this week there was a report from the UN saying that over 4 million Kenyans are dealing in cryptocurrencies. Is anybody in this room on Bitcoin or Ethereum? Maybe you can put up your hand. Yeah, at least one person. Oh, you too, Susan. Wow, okay. So maybe a handful of people, but basically we're seeing a situation in the market that people are actually trading in cryptocurrencies and that sort of thing, but apparently up to 4 million accounts active in this country. So typically, again, these are the transactions and the currencies that we use to trade on platforms that allow us to interact with Web3. And remember that it's a peer-to-peer system. It's not under something like the central bank. And that's why, of course, there's no regulation at the moment, and we're seeing these massive fluctuations in terms of the value of things like Bitcoin. Go to the next slide, please. Again, this is not rocket science, because even the central bank is now planning to launch a digital currency in Kenya. I think by the end of the year, this might be in place. So whereas you have cryptocurrencies and so forth, which are unregulated, these will be based on what we call stable coins, which will be linked to an actual currency. And these are sort of the opportunities that we see going forward in terms of how this might work in a more regulated framework. Next slide. Then you have what we call the crypto exchanges. Okay, so this is where you're able to buy and sell cryptocurrencies, where you're able to, for instance, buy a Bitcoin or take out Bitcoin and turn it into, say, US dollars or Kenya shillings. So the crypto exchange essentially provides you a platform where you can actually buy and sell currencies, whether it's crypto to crypto or crypto to what we call fiat, which is regular currencies, or taking actual money like your M-Pesa and putting it into a cryptocurrency to then buy and sell products and services online, for instance. Next slide. So some of the ones that you must know or that are very popular in this part of the world is Paxful. Paxful is probably the one that was most active initially. And again, this is a peer-to-peer platform where you're able to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. You're able to take M-Pesa, put it into this platform, and outside that. And then we have the next one, please. Next slide. Then, of course, you have Binance. Binance is the world's biggest crypto exchange. Millions and millions of people are using it. And even in Kenya, for instance, we're seeing that it's probably the biggest and the most popular at the moment. Next one. This for me was interesting a few months ago, seeing this billboard and seeing that there are other platforms that are coming into the market. And you can see over here, Binance, for instance, were offering last year a free promotion so you could do zero deposit. So no costs if you wanted to deposit money or to buy cryptocurrencies on their platform. Next slide. And then most recently, this is Crypto Sasa. As far as I know, this will be the first fully fledged, locally based crypto exchange in this country. And I think they're launching, if it's not this month, by next month. Of course, with the reality at the moment being that crypto, I think, is down something like 80%. There is, of course, a lot of hesitation and so forth. But what I love about their concept is that they want people to be able to buy cryptocurrencies for as little as 100 shillings. And I think this is going to be crazy once it takes off. Of course, like I said, right now in the short term, just like the dot-com bust of 20 years ago, things don't look particularly good. But more importantly, you can see what that means. Sorry, Susan, just go back, please. The next slide again. Sorry. So in order to use many of these, you'll have what you call a non-custodial wallet. So whenever you want to do stuff on crypto, if you want to buy and sell NFTs, you generally have a wallet. The one that I am familiar with and the one that I would recommend is something called MetaMask. And you can go online, register for it, and it allows you then to have a store or a place where you can hold your crypto assets, your NFTs, and so forth. It's also one of the best ones in terms of that it links to many exchanges, so it allows you really to have a nice centralized place. The only catch about this is that the way they work is there's no centralized system per se, so you are responsible for the security and the protection of your own wallet, right? So you're almost like literally in your own world when you do these things with a non-custodial wallet. A custodial wallet would be something like M-Pesa, which is a wallet, a financial wallet based on real currency, but it's within a system or a platform such as, of course, Safaricom, which is protected and regulated properly. So just remember that in a non-custodial scenario, you're basically on your own. Next slide, please. So this is MetaMask, and as you can see, it allows you to buy and sell everything, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the different currencies, and it works globally, and it's used by over 20 million people. So it's a good one to work with. Next slide, please. And then you have what we call DAOs, or distributed or decentralized autonomous organizations. So increasingly, again, in Web 3.0, what we're seeing is that people are creating virtual organizations based on the blockchain, which are called DAOs. And this is, again, an interesting concept where, for instance, like in Kenya, we have our traditional chamas. You could create your own DAO, which is based on a blockchain, and people can choose to participate and be part of it. They can use their cryptocurrencies to fund and be part of your DAO. And of course, you're able to use the smart contracts to set essentially the guidelines and the operating model and so forth of that particular DAO. So again, this is an interesting concept where organizations of the past that required you to be registered by government and so forth become irrelevant because you then have this virtual organization that we call a DAO. Next slide. And then this is an example of Uniswap, which is one of the biggest DAOs in the world. It basically builds and works on decentralized crypto trading. You can see their trading volume is over $1.1 trillion. Significant revenue, significant activities around their platform. And pretty much anyone can join and become a part of this DAO as well. The next one. And then, of course, non-fungible tokens. I think for me, the thing that really brought attention to Web 3.0 in the last year or so was the arrival of NFTs, and in particular this one massive transaction for Beeple. Beeple is a digital artist, and he sold an NFT for almost $70 million. When this happened, everybody woke up, right? This felt exactly like the time when back in Web 1.0 we saw companies that were startups being valued for $1 billion. So when this happened and people saw the potential, essentially for digital art or digital assets that you can run on the blockchain, NFT suddenly became probably the most interesting manifestation of what Web 3.0 could be. Now, the one thing that is very important to note, even now, NFTs are diving in terms of valuations, but the main thesis is that your digital asset has value and that you can trade with it on the blockchain and you can buy and sell different digital assets through this platform. Go next slide. Now, do any of you guys have children? Do any of you guys know, if you have young children, this thing called Roblox? Yeah, during my son's last birthday, he didn't want a toy, he didn't want a PS4, any of that stuff. He just said, Dad, I just want some digital currency so I can buy stuff within Roblox. So what is happening in the world today is that the younger people, remember the generations who are young are the ones who show us the future, now value digital assets in platforms like Roblox, in games like Roblox online, rather than a physical toy or gift. All right? So already their mind is tuned into the idea that a digital thing can be more valuable than a physical asset. Now, even if we don't understand it, I mean, I grew up reading newspapers. The young guys don't read newspapers, as you know, but going into the future, there'll be more value in digital assets as opposed to things that you might buy in the physical world. Next slide, please. And you can see the way you can use actual currency to buy gift cards and so forth, and then your children can go into Roblox and actually buy products and things in there. Next, please. So CryptoPunks, again, in terms of some of the better-known NFT projects that have generated incredible value. CryptoPunks is basically 10,000 collectible characters. If you go to the next slide, and this works on MetaMask and Ethereum, you can see their value in Ethereum at the time, but you can see that graphic, the first one there, is worth $23.7 million, at least at that time. Of course, with the downgrading of crypto at the moment, that value is not the same. But these are sort of things that people are able to sell for that kind of price. It doesn't look valuable, but within the community that buys and sells NFTs, they consider this to be very valuable. Next slide. And then you have VFriends, which is yet another platform for NFTs. And you go to the next slide, Susan, you can see, for instance, that Cheerful Monk is like 41,000 US dollars. So for me, why I like this and what it shows me is that if you want to practically play in the NFT space, for instance, would be A, do you want to buy and sell NFTs, or do you want to create your own NFTs and monetize this within the Web 3.0 situation? Next slide. This is Binance NFT. So Binance, which of course is the largest and most popular crypto exchange, have also built now an NFT capability within their platform, so you can buy and sell and trade in NFTs within the same as well. So this becomes then a marketplace around which you can sell and monetize your NFTs. But more importantly, an NFT is a digital asset that can also represent physical assets as well. If we move to the next slide. CryptoKitties, yet another one, where again worth millions and millions of dollars in terms of digital art that is being sold within the platform. Next one. So to show again how organizations and brands are practically utilizing NFTs, this is people like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour getting into the NFT game. If we go to the next slide, we can see, for instance, that Nike purchased a virtual shoe company that makes NFTs and sneakers for the virtual space. And what they're doing here is that they're able to connect an actual physical NFT, an NFT digital asset with, let's say, a pair of shoes you can also get when you buy the same. So the idea is that they're linking a virtual asset or a digital asset to a physical asset, which then gives you tangible value in the things that you want to purchase through your, your digital currencies and so forth. Next one. NFTs are more than digital images. Again, this is another example of how NFTs can be used in the real world. This was a recent report on CNN, and they're saying even though crypto is crashing, the tech behind it could save luxury brands and billions. Like I mentioned earlier, remember Web 1.0, 99% of the companies went down, but the few that survived that had a solid use case for how you could use Web 1, people like Amazon and Google went on to thrive and continue to thrive to this very day. So what's happening in the luxury space is that there's a massive global counterfeit market for luxury products around the world. People often are buying stuff they think is authentic, but it's fake. So that Prada bag or that Louis Vuitton item is not authentic. But what they're trying to do is use NFTs and sort of embedding NFTs to the physical asset, so that if you're trying to sell your used bag that was an expensive luxury product, it'll have an NFT attached to it, and that's how then you can see that it's authentic, but also there's residual value that each time it's sold, that the buyer and the seller can also make some money in the process, okay? So these are some of the early examples we're seeing where, companies are trying to experiment and say, an NFT is not just about an image, it's about verifying using the blockchain that this is an actual authentic product or service, or adding additional utility to the NFT for things that you can use in the real world. So think about things like memberships. You buy an NFT, it gives you maybe early access to products, or you buy maybe a new smartphone from Samsung and they give you an NFT, and maybe gives you access to certain virtual services or products. So that for me is really the practical side of what you could do with an NFT. Next slide, please. If you want to create NFTs and actually experiment in this place, is a platform called OpenSea. OpenSea is one of the largest NFT marketplaces in the world. It also works with MetaMask. It's very easy to go onto this platform, and if you're a good photographer, graphic designer, or you create animations, you can actually start to sell them on this platform. Next slide. I myself opened an account sometime last year, because I do like to do photography. So this, again, is an opportunity to monetize using Web3, your own content. Next slide. And this is just an example of kind of like the portfolio or the project I created within OpenSea, which is, this is a sunrise one morning in Mombasa. Got some incredible photos, and I sort of picked out the ones I liked and put them on. But you can probably see the very first one is something that looks like Minecraft, and that's my son's. Okay, so my son saw me doing this, and he's like, "No, Dad, I like Minecraft. Why don't I create some art for Minecraft, and you can sell it for me?" Okay, so imagine a young child could potentially be selling their own digital art within a platform like OpenSea that somebody might actually like and want to buy. So it's really lowering the barriers to what you can do in terms of opportunities within Web3. So that's just a practical demonstration. Somebody locally, a young man who's using NFTs to sell his art. Like he said, if you're selling it in a conventional sense, he would only make 20,000. He's using NFTs and reaching a global market, and he's selling for over $3,000 for one piece of art. So you can start to see the economics of this. It makes a lot of sense. Going back to the metaverse, the way the likes of Mark Zuckerberg see it, in terms of where we are today with those virtual 3D environments, this is the Oculus Quest 2. It's the most popular virtual headset and system. Like I said, I think these things are still probably another 10 years away before they become practical and useful for many people. Obviously, the cost, again, $299 is almost 35,000 shillings. It's not accessible to everyone. And I'm yet to see people live in these environments day in, day out. People go in to play games for a few hours and probably park it for the next 1 week. But in the vision that Mark Zuckerberg has, this becomes the way that we interact with the metaverse. Next one, please. And again, doing physical things in a virtual space, that's, what the future is starting to look like from that point of view. The next slide. Different features and capabilities from that point of view. The next slide. And then, yeah, all the different ways that in which you can actually start using VR and, creating these virtual environments for the metaverse. Yeah. And I think this is just my closing remarks. I'm a big fan of quotes, and this is one of my favorite from Charles Darwin, which says it's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent, but those most adaptable to change. So going from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 1.3, we're now just beginning Web 3. I would say we're really in Web 2.5 right now. We are not yet there. But the idea is that you need to start learning, experimenting, do the practical stuff I've shown you, and start to understand how this stuff actually works. Nobody has figured it out yet. These are the early days. And remember, the people who become most successful in a technology or a new thing that comes into the market are the ones who invest the most time understanding how it works, using it practically, like this young man we saw from the Safaricom video. And then 2 to 5 years later, we get surprised that they're a billionaire or that they're a leader in a new industry or space because they got there early, they acquired the practical skills, they understood how the landscape works, and then they become proficient at it. So those would be my parting words, that make sure you change, make sure you adapt. Web3 is coming. It's still early days. There are no clear leaders, but those who invest the most time now are the ones who get the disproportionate return on the effort. Thank you very much.
Wow, a big round of applause for him. Thank you so much, Moses, for that presentation.